researcher. I
Right.
want that with each of the researchers.
Yes.
But if there's conflict or disagreement,
right,
I don't want to get involved in
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. But all of these issues certainly kind of pull in this idea of like when we think of projects from a cost perspective, it can be easy to put blinders on and just think of it in terms of dollars and cents costs,
Right.
and forget about all of the intangible costs and benefits that are, right? Like what I was just describing about the collaborative, innovative research that is possible by creating these interdisciplinary teams.
Right.
Some of that is like stepping out into the unknown, which ASU is really great at, but there's risk involved in that, but it's also, there's some intangibility to that. Like how much, like it almost would be asking the question, like how much of what you're doing on each individual project, how is that contributing to the fact that ASU has been determined to be the #1 in innovation for
Right.
several years running, right?
So
Like there is a connection, but it's a funny dotted,
Right.
line.
The advantage, everything has a plus and minus. So the advantage is you can cost share. So now maybe I have two people that can share costs. So I'm not spending $1 million on this person and 200,000 here. Maybe we call it 500 or 750,000 for the two of them. And that is an advantage. And then the other thing is that once I've renovated a space and taken it from, say, a 1957 to a 2019, now it's going to be like that for another
Right.
20 years. So you have a life cycle, which we talked about a little bit earlier, that's now been improved for the building. Because typically here, the researcher is going to shrink or grow. They're not usually going to do the same thing forever. They're either going to collaborate and get bigger, and this is another advantage of the interdisciplinary spaces, is that they have room now to expand, whereas if they just had one lab, I've got to move them and maybe start all over or get another lab to augment that. So there's, the disadvantage is experiments are not necessarily able to just be left for days at a time or weeks at a time, or because you're sharing tools, and there has to be some type of system set up within that group that makes it easier for them to work. Mostly that doesn't affect what I do. I'm more interested in getting all the infrastructure there, but it does affect the cost, and it also affects the schedule, because now I'm always working with the person who needs it the quickest. This person might not need it till then, but if this person needs it sooner and it's a neighborhood, now I'm working with that as the goal of the schedule.
Right.
And that might cost more.
And you were talking about the schedule a little earlier. I liked the term you were using. What did you call it? Semesterville.
Yeah.
We live in Semesterville.
Yeah.
We do. And,
Yeah.
and depending on the industry, like in the banking industry, in the healthcare industry, there would be different time frames. There's the year is looked at differently, and there's certain markers in a year. And obviously in a university, we have time frames where things have to be done by a certain time because of the overarching, functions that exist within the organization.
Right, that's true. So typically hiring is done either in the fall or the spring at the end of the semester, more in the spring because not everybody wants to leave or give notice halfway through the year, through an academic year. So I think we just had, 15 hires or whatever, so now I'm going to have a bunch of people that are either going to come in September or they're going to come in January. And I'm working with them before they even move here, before they're here at all. They could be in Connecticut or Washington, wherever they are. And we're trying to get as much done before they get here as we can. And all of this prioritization of projects is also happening. Who's first, who's second, who's third, or can they all be done concurrently? What's the budget? Because there is a budget usually, and getting enough information to give accurate feedback to the dean's office or whoever's managing that budget. And so that all of those things happen by semester, and it's very rare unless it's a dry lab like we talked about, computers that just need an office. To have that done in 3 months is no problem. But to try to have something done by January, which seems like a long period of time, 6 months is not long when you consider all of the things that have to be purchased and designed and contracted, and everybody's got a time. Everything we do has its own time and schedule, And so typically here, it takes us a year to get something built where they can use it. But their clock for tenure or for being evaluated starts when they get here.
Right.
And so there's a lot of pressure on the researcher and us too in order to get them working as soon as possible. The latest, I don't know if it's a directive, but what we're trying to do more and more is pre-build space that's infrastructure ready for a certain swath, if you will, or group of people that can do work within that infrastructure, where we just have to add a little bit. And other people that might need something either less than that or more than that, falling out of the bell curve, if you will. Maybe it's the 80-20, or here's probably 60-40. Probably we can cover 60% with that. 40% of specialty would be outside of that. That's where we're trying to go now. It's just because there's so many schools and there's so many different kinds of research going on, and it's constantly changing. It's a little hard to do that.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Literature has strengths and weaknesses that I have to cover. So many times certain college professors are very good at the research and probably very well written. They have no idea about their equipment, how to set it up, how it operates. They just know how to operate it. Other people understand everything there is about it, and they can hook it up, and they can build it if they had to. And so there's a great variance in who my client is going to be and their knowledge base. So we have infilled that with lab managers because they tend to be generalists. And so I'm working more and more with coaching by using a lab manager who then works with the weaknesses of that particular researcher in order to augment that, so that the information that I'm getting makes it so that the installation will be research capable with the assistance of the lab manager, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
And then the other thing that is a little different than so of course in research we have a SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The other thing that's a little different is I typically am working with the same, so we have teams in CPMG that I'm their client, so it's a team of people, not just one. So I'm also relationship building. So I don't want to get all bent out of shape on a project and then have a problem with the team because maybe it was the best liked person in the team that wasn't a great project manager, but they're well liked. So now you've created, I think some of you wrote something about political cost. So at the end of the day, we're leaders and we're relationship builders. And we want to be very careful, and I can't quote exactly who said it, but you can do 100 things right and one thing wrong, and the one thing contain all the things you did right? Like there's no such thing as a gaining integrity back once you've lost it. You can be the most integrative person, if that's the word, and then you do something stupid like pay someone to take a test for an SAT, and your reputation's done.
Right.
It's over, right? And so this is the fine line that project management has to walk. A project manager has to walk when they have all these teams in coaching, relationship building, and not being too negative. And sometimes it's hard because sometimes you have to say the tough thing, but you have to say it in a way that's not attacking, it's more teaching.
Right.
And that's not an easy thing to do, and I don't know if we teach that or not.
Right.
Because that's really a social communication skill more than a project management skill.
Exactly, and I think sometimes the project management sort of scripted, and like the project management courses and tools and, kind of the sort of this lessons learned and the top 15 ways to make sure you never have a problem on your project or whatever, tends to focus on more of a, don't ever make a mistake and follow this really rigid set of things. But what you're talking about from this relationship perspective, I think resonates really well for me because it is an ongoing set of relationships that are continuing within an organization.
Right.
that is moving and evolving to achieve some long-term goals. And so to achieve, quote, perfection on any particular project, but to like you said, damage your own reputation beyond repair,
Right.
or to throw somebody else under the bus, so to speak,
Right.
wouldn't be worthwhile.
No.
And it wouldn't, so sometimes what looks like a project management mistake or whatever, it really is a wise move from a project management perspective,
Right.
to allow some messiness, or to allow some,
Right.
what
Or
some might.
in a
Okay.
in a metaphor of refereeing, sometimes a no call is the right call.
Yeah,
It let people play, and so and then we often talk about a cost benefit or cost detriment, and in this particular case, definitely in a sometimes, I've come out of industry, and in a bureaucratic environment, it just almost never is valuable to say something negative about a coworker. I haven't found that to be valuable at all. I did some mistakes like that early because as a boss and an entrepreneur, I said a lot of tough things to people, but then they had to do it or they wouldn't have a job. But here that's not the case, and there could be a passive aggressiveness that's not healthy for the relationship that you still are going to work with this person. And so that's a learning curve. That was a big learning curve for me, in that I wasn't used to that. And even though I see now, looking back, how simple that thinking is when you come from an environment where it's all about making money, and the performance review that you're talking about determines your bonus, determines whether you get moved up or not. It can be very personal.
right.
Here, it's just not that personal. It should never be personal. It's really about the job. How can we collaborate? If you're going on vacation or you're too busy or whatever, how can we collaborate so we can still get it done, regardless of the specific circumstances?
Right.
And that seems to be a better way to go.
Yeah, and then also, always having that ethics that is right there where it needs to be
Right.
as well. And
That's
so
right.
that's where the, applying the critical analysis to be like, okay, where we do have to ask the tough questions, and sometimes those tough questions do create spaces for some individuals to feel embarrassed because of their actions
I
in
think
the
asking
overall
tough
process.
questions is good. It's making tough statements that's bad.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
Can
if
you
you-
say more about that?
Sure, yeah, because to me, it's all about how you ask the question. Because now you're not stating anything, you're not giving an opinion, you're saying, well, how are we gonna do that? Or how's that gonna work? Or how do you see us collaborating to get that done? Or something like that, I think I'd much rather I think it's always, this is not always, never, it's much better to ask questions than to make statements, almost all the time. And that's how you learn, and there may be something you don't know, that it never even occurred to you, but when you ask the question, it comes to light, and you're like, oh, I'm glad I didn't say what I was gonna say, because now this is something I didn't even know about.